Welcome to Our Girl Relationships. We talk about the problems people face in their day to day lives. Let's start with the video. I'm a 30-year-old female and I've been married for 14 years now. My husband, 32, has always been a very people pleasing person, which comes out in trying to make everyone happy, which backfires a lot too. For example, in trying to keep his parents or friends happy, he can be insensitive to my emotions or the emotions of our kids. I'm generally good with being calm and put up with his actions pretty well. However, recently his actions made me have a rare outburst because it crossed the line. He had invited his friends over for lunch and everyone was in light spirits. I had made lunch for them and they had moved on to insensitive jokes at people's expense by the time lunch rolled around. He isn't usually someone who enjoys such jokes, but with his friends, he becomes a different person altogether. He tries so hard to fit in that he forgets his moral values and simply becomes one of them, like a machine. He tends to forget that we are human beings too, and our emotions can get hurt in his efforts to please others. I had put in a lot of effort into cooking lunch for him and his friends that day, and he had specifically told me that I had done a good job after tasting the food. I was looking forward to them enjoying their meal, and I was quite sure that they would like it. However, some of them seemed to find the food too spicy and couldn't really finish it. I had not been informed of anyone's particular taste, so I had cooked as I normally would, but it seemed like I had made a mistake. Everyone seemed a little discomforted, and my husband tried his trusted way to break the atmosphere by making jokes. He joked that he had expected me to learn to cook by now at least, seeing as he hadn't had a good meal at home for years. He even mentioned that I added spice to food in direct proportion to my temper, so as I was bitter tempered and hot headed, I tended to add more spice to food. Everyone started laughing at that point and relaxed, but I felt humiliated. I had not expected him to put me down in order to make his friends happy. He had humiliated me to keep an atmosphere of camaraderie between his friends and him, and didn't even seem to realize that he had done anything wrong. The rest of the day I remained curt and polite with him at best. After his friends left, he decided to confront me about my exceedingly rude behavior in front of his friends and demanded a reason as to why I had humiliated him in front of them so badly. I knew that he needed a dose of reality, or he would never stop treating me like a doormat. So I told him that he was the one who humiliated me with his jokes made at my expense, and I had decided to not put up with his behavior any longer. He called me too dramatic, asking me why I would blow things up out of proportion over a simple joke. He didn't seem to understand that insulting me in the name of a joke was no simple matter. He claimed that he had not insulted me in any way, and if I felt insulted, then maybe his words had a grain of truth in them and I should change myself. He told me that I knew about his joking personality, so I shouldn't take things so personally when he tries to keep everyone happy. I told him outright that he didn't really keep everyone happy if he kept using his wife and kids as scapegoats for others' enjoyment. He didn't seem to agree with me or even see my point at all. I was tired of arguing at this point and told him that if he was going to treat me like this, I might as well do something to deserve it. He didn't seem to understand my words and told me that I was free to do as I liked, as long as I didn't pick any stupid fights with him anymore. I have tried long and hard to explain my issues to him, but have had no success so far. I'm close to giving up and screaming in his face in the hopes that finally he will listen. The worst thing is, he doesn't even feel bad for what he did. He perhaps doesn't even realize why or how it was humiliating. I had expected much better from the man I have married. I have come to the conclusion the only way to beat him is to play him at his own game. I need to make him regret his words so that he realizes how wrong he was and how hurtful he was. This will only be possible if I show him literally exactly the kind of nonsense he had said about me. This is going to be fun. So I put my plan to action. It only took a week for him to start begging. I never felt so smug. He needs to realize his mistakes, and I'm so glad I'm taking steps in the right direction. This entire week, I have done everything that he had made fun of me for, word to word. I kept messing up every single dish I cooked to the point where he was having to order in for every single meal. The food is neither too salty or has absolutely no flavor at all. I'm behaving as if I never learnt my way around the kitchen and secretly cooking proper meals only for my kids. He had confronted me about it twice, but I played dumb, only repeating his own words back to him, and internally I would scream with glee. I also started adding more spice in the food than in humanly possible to consume. The first time he tasted one of my dishes with too much spice, he physically started crying at the first mouthful and threw the rest of it away. At this point, every single dish that I haven't made, completely flavorless, is overlaid with red chili, so much so that I don't think anyone would be able to eat it without getting gastric issues. He has confronted me a few times over the week, and all I have done is repeat his own words back to him. He had not expected me to fight him back in his own game. Being someone who avoids confrontation, he hadn't really fought me or accused me of anything. He has only been stubborn, buying his own meals, and I have been messing with him completely, notching up the levels to get some reaction out of him. He seems to realize why I'm doing what I'm doing, but he refuses to admit where he went wrong. He has been begging me to stop my antics, but I know that if I give up now, I'm admitting defeat forever. He has taken to blackmailing me with the kids, reminding me that they are also being tortured by my food, not knowing that they were getting proper food cooked by me. He has pleaded with me to stop torturing him because he doesn't know how to cook, and my actions are ensuring that he's had no home cooked food in the past week. I have asked him to simply apologize and I'll stop. But he refuses to apologize, claiming that I'm manipulating him into apologizing. That's fine by me. This game is going to continue as long as he wants it to. Finally, finally, he caves in, and with much more surprising results than I had expected. Really, I would have never taken things this far. So, two of his friends came over for lunch yet again. The only problem was I was still trying to get him to apologize, so the food I had cooked wasn't exactly safe for consumption. My husband hadn't informed me that he was bringing his friends home, or I would have prepared something safer, but it was too late now. They were going to bear the exceedingly spicy food and hopefully not have upset stomachs right after. My husband kept looking at me as if he knew that the food wasn't consumable, but he said nothing to stop his friends. Before I could say anything, it happened. His friends took a spoonful of curry I had made in his mouth. He spat it out instantly and went to wash his mouth out, letting out a stream of explosives on the way. His other friends stared at us dumbly, not knowing what was going on or why his friend had reacted so badly to the food. I could feel the tension escalating and my husband internally panicking, trying to think of ways to reduce any displeasure in their minds. When his friend returned, he demanded a reason as to why the food was so spicy because he was sure no human being could enjoy food that spicy. My husband shakily tried to give them a general rundown of what had exactly gone down in order for us to reach this point. He seemed to want to sink down into the earth in embarrassment, and I was honestly in full agreement with him. We hadn't expected to drag any outsiders into our fight, and this was an extremely humiliating situation to be in. Suddenly, his friends started laughing, one of them pointing out that I had certainly lived up to the expectations he had set that day. Seeing them enjoy the situation and find the funny side of it calmed my husband down considerably, and he wholeheartedly apologized to me. He told me honestly that he had gone overboard with his joke, and he shouldn't have dragged his own wife like that, just to please others. I was honestly glad that even though things went this far, he realized his mistake. I was getting as tired of this game as he was, and honestly, we were only going along with it because we're both stubborn. His friends took the entire matter in a good-humored light and lightly scolded him, telling him that he got what was coming for him because he had insulted me like that. I'm honestly glad that he has apologized, and gladder even that his friends were good enough to understand the situation and not be angry or offended. In hindsight, this could turn out to become one of those funny stories that get repeated at dinner. But right now, we feel too close to embarrassment to even mention this story to anyone ever again. Maybe in a few years when we're both a bit more mature. I'm glad that both Opie and her husband managed to resolve this issue. It honestly has the same vibe as two siblings fighting and being stubborn to their points of view. In this case, the husband was clearly wrong, but Opie seems to have really dragged out the matter. I'm glad that they both realized they were being children. Bless those friends that appeared for lunch and made them both see sense. OP was in the right for defending herself, but this was so petty it made me laugh. I wish all couples fights were this light-hearted and could be resolved this easily. I have a brother-in-law, Matt, who I really can't stand. He is a plastic surgeon, and pretty much every bad stereotype about the profession applies. He has always looked down on us for having a more average middle-class lifestyle. He is pretty subtle with his digs, but likes to comment on how he would die if he was my husband because our lives look so awful. He has joked to both of my kids that don't they want to make a lot of money like him and not be boring like their mom and dad? Unfortunately, my husband is close to him and my son worships him. My daughter doesn't like him very much and has pointed some of this out to her dad. Recently, Matt and his wife were over for dinner. Matt and my husband were just having a conversation, and Matt made a comment about how much he hates it when men call their wives of girlfriends beautiful when they aren't. I pointed out that beauty is in the eye of the beholder, and those men probably do find their partners beautiful. Matt said no. Beauty actually comes down to science and math. And you are either beautiful or you aren't. And everything else is just something society tells us to make people feel better. He then went on to say that obviously people are going to marry your equal. So if you're ugly or average, your partner won't be attractive unless you are loaded. But why lie about it? And it makes him cringe. I snapped at my husband that I don't want this crap said in front of my kids and asked him to do something. My husband just sat there. Matt said we all know he was right and just don't want to admit it. My daughter finally spoke up because she has limited tolerance for his BS and told him that with that logic, he doesn't compliment his wife's personality, does he? Matt got pissed and began yelling at all of us. I told him to just leave, and he laughed and said no. He was going to finish his steak. I didn't even know what to do, and he sat there and proceeded to lecture my daughter on how she must hate women because his wife is a doctor, and how dare she reduce her to just a pretty face. He stayed just long enough to make a point and then stormed out, and his wife said goodbye to everyone except my daughter. I confronted my husband and said, I don't want Matt in our house again, and I don't want him around the kids. My husband is free to still see him, but I feel he is toxic. My husband got upset and said I was being too hard on him. He says banning him is too drastic and we can't change him, but he still wants a relationship and feels our son should be free to see him. I'm standing firm right now. I don't want him around my kids or in my house. NTA, if your husband doesn't see how your son worshipping this toxic man is going to result in your son likely adopting his toxic views, then you and husband need to have a serious talk. So this grown-ass man spews toxic BS and yells at your children, which is verbal abuse, BTW, and your husband is cool with this? He's okay with your children being indoctrinated by a misogynistic, uninformed, arrogant prick who literally abused your children? 100% NTA, but you will be if you allow Matt near your children again. Do not allow your children to be harmed just to keep your husband happy. And BTW, Matt is a complete moron. Beauty is absolutely subjective. Why else would different societies have different standards for beauty? Or is he so ignorant and arrogant that he believes Western beauty ideals are the only appropriate set of standards? People like him make me sick, and I hope you never have to be insulted with his presence again. I'm a psychologist who specializes in body image and trauma, and people like Matt are why I will never run out of work. He's a sorry excuse for a human being, and I hope your husband pulls his head out of his ass ASAP. 2 years ago, my wife and I bought a house. It's relatively large and spacious and also includes a guest house. It's also our first house. I was the first one in my family to buy a house, as we've never had that before. Both mine and my wife's family grew up very poor, and we managed to get ourselves into a relatively comfortable lifestyle, having successful careers. At the time, my mother and her boyfriend were living in a pretty bad area. Just months before we moved, they had a kid gunned down right in front of their apartment. So I told my mom I'd get her out of there as soon as I was able to. We got the house and moved her into the guest house immediately. After crunching the numbers on bills, we settled at $1,200 a month flat rate for her and her boyfriend to stay with us, which overall is cheaper than their old apartment. A couple of months go by at the new house and my wife's dad loses his job. Well, we had a spare bedroom and moved him in with us free of charge so that he could get on his feet. About 6 months into the new house, my sister gets really sick and can no longer work. She and her 3 boys move in. I am now supporting an entire second family who is living with me for free, plus my wife's dad, who is now working. 2 years later, all of them are still living with us. A year ago, my mom informed me that her and her boyfriend couldn't afford the $1,200 rate we agreed to and asked to lower to $800 a month. I agreed. My sister still can't work. However, she also has substance abuse issues, which I believe is causing, or at least indefinitely not helping, with her ability to work and her sickness. I have already had to kick her out once, but my mom insisted that she move back in because she's worried if we don't take care of her, then she'll end up dead somewhere. My wife and I have been together for 7 years, and one of the goals we set was to ensure our kids do not grow up like we did in poverty. We managed to achieve that and get a dream house. However, have not had any chance to actually enjoy the house to ourselves because there's so many people. My kids barely have space of their own in this house we bought for them to do just that. I just got an email this morning that electricity rates have doubled in my renewal notice. Gas and groceries are up. Natural gas is up on the house. My mom is the only one contributing, and my wife and I are going crazy. I'm planning a family meeting tonight with everyone to talk, but I want everyone gone. My mom's boyfriend makes decent money as well. She will be taken care of. My wife's dad has a job. I'm sure he'll be fine. My sister and her boys are the only ones I'm worried that I'm kicking out to the streets. I know this is probably going to be a huge argument, and chances are I'm going to alienate my sister and my mom by doing this. WIBTA? NTA, it's not just your family. Everyone in this story should be living their own lives. If your mom is concerned about your sister and her boys, then mom and her boyfriend can look for a place that houses all of them. But you've already done your part and more. NTA, but I'd offer to keep your nephews in the house. Everyone else is an adult, so they can fend for themselves. Your nephews, I'm assuming, are children, and if your sister has substance issues, they will suffer horribly, so I'd offer to keep them. But that's just me.